My name is Paula Vazquez, and today the photographer I will be talking about is Robert Capa. So, a quote that really defines Robert Capa and his life of work or his being famous of being a wartime photojournalist is if pictures aren't good enough, you're not close enough. And that really did apply to all his photographs. Um, a little bit about Robert Capa is Robert Capa was born in Budapest, Hungary in 1913 under the name of Andrzej Friedman. It was until later where he transferred his name to Robert Capa or changed it. But ever since he was a little kid, he was like full of energy, always looking for adventures and danger. He was always bored, so that's how he seeked to explore new things. They gave him the nickname of Kappa, which actually means shark. Um, when he was 18, he moved to Vienna, then Prague, and finally settled in Berlin. And there in Berlin, he started studying political science and journalism. However, he always was kind of interested in photography, so he later decided to choose the major in photography, and that's how he combined his passion for journalism and photography and became a photojournalist. Um, he knew very famous people throughout his life, one of them being Ernest Hemingway, the most important person in his life, and also met people like Pablo Picasso. But before that, he started his photojournalism adventures with the Spanish Civil War, accompanied by his friend, um, and he became really famous there with the photograph of the loyalist soldier, and that's where he became famous with the quote of saying, "If your pictures aren't good enough, that you're not close enough." Then he moved on to World War II, documenting World War II for Life magazine. Became famous with the photographs of the Normandy invasion, also known as D-Day. He later died at the age of 41 in 1954 because he accidentally stepped on a landmine while doing his photojournalism work in Vietnam. A little bit about his photographic career was his first pictures were in the Spanish Civil War. Like I said before, his most famous picture, well, that started him to be a famous photographer, was the death of a loyalist soldier. Then he later on went to World War II, where he worked freelance for Life and Time magazine. Um, he he was a correspondent for Life, traveling with the U.S. Army, and he was documenting Allied victories both in North Africa and Normandy. He finally settled to capture the Allied victory of Leipzig, Nuremberg, and Berlin. But after that, he joined Henry Cartier-Bresson and David Seymour with George Roger in founding Magnum, which is a cooperative photography agency that provided pictures for international publications. After that, he did um, the French War in Indochina for Life in 1954, where that's where he shortly died after just arriving. So here are a little bit of his first photographs of the Spanish Civil War. These four photographs explain a little bit, like not explain, but show how he did his photojournalist work, which not only capturing war, but capturing how war affected the people and what was happening in Spain. So here, a soldier with his, well, it looks like another soldier, and also here the soldiers interacting with like the common people here doing laundry, just being normal. Um, Here, one of the famous ones saluting um, uh, the International Brigade, which is a little bit is they were a group of foreign volunteers who fought on the Republican side against the nationalist forces during the Spanish Civil War. He actually did a quote about this experience, which was, "The attack is about to begin. The division's motto is spare Nothing. In a few minutes, the officers arrange last minute details, and the commissar still finds time to make a quick speech to the battalion. His words are full of passion, but his voice is calm and firm. His venga venga will remain in everybody's ear no matter what happens. Now the men start walking forward in a single file. In this kind of war, there are no longer trenches, but only a few to protect spots like squares on a chessboard. One by one, the men run forward to the next firing zone. So this is a little picture of the afterwards and the meaning behind these pictures. This one of the last photographs of the Spanish Civil War, which is about the mobilization center, which is an off-incident location at which emergency services personnel and equipment are temporarily located, with pending assignments, release, or reassignments. So this is a little bit of showing of how the war affected the people in Spain. Then, when he worked in China, here he is showing a little bit of like what again was his purpose of if you're not close enough, they're not good enough, or if you're not good enough, you're not close enough, showing the hardships of war and how it affects like the daily life of people, not only soldiers but the innocent. Also here how war with the propaganda and everything is affecting young ones and how they see war, and that is something he wanted to document in all of his pictures. Then we move on to World War II, where he was again with the army, was it with the U.S. Army, documenting Allied victories, and it's a little bit of he gets a little bit of everything. Here carrying the wounded soldier, the capturing of German soldiers, also being in certain situations where he was also a common man and walking through the streets of Paris where it is war after all, and they were firing it at all these innocent people. You can see the man and the woman, the everyone kind of distracted and confused of what's going on. Um, but in the midst of everything that was happening in war, he did have a party, a very big party held in London. And this being his friend Ernest Hemingway, he also had something to say about this. Was that he quoted, "The invasion rumors and the arrivals of very important people increased daily. Ernest Hemingway, our friendship dated from the good days. His nickname was Papa, and anyways, and I soon adopted him as father. In the years between, he had many occasions to fulfill his parental obligations, and now was glad to see his adopted son in no obvious need for cash. To prove my devotion and prosperity, I decided to give him a party in my useless and very expensive apartment. They drank the scotch, they drank the champagne and the brandy and gin too. At 4 in the morning, the bottles were emptying and the guests began to trickle away. The doctor offered to give Hemingway a lift to his hotel. At 7 in the morning, my telephone rang. The hospital was calling, asking me to come to the emergency room. There on the operating table, I found 215 pounds of Papa. His skull was split wide open and his beard full of blood. After 48 stitches, Papa's head looked better than new. In the emergency room, they heard me calling him Papa, and I became known as Mr. Kappa Hemingway." So that's a little bit of background of this photograph of his dear friend Hemingway. Then obviously the war kept going. So this is a little bit of how was happening in Germany with the war. This is a very important picture because it's considered to be the last picture of the war. He quotes, "The last man shooting the gun was not much different from the first. His face not changed except for a tiny hole between his eyes. The puddle of blood grew beside his fallen head, and his pulse had long stopped beating. I had the picture of the last man to die, the last day, some of the best ones to die, but those alive will last forget." So this is considered to be the last picture of American dying. Then we moved a little bit to the Soviet Union, where he went to document a little bit of what was happening in Russia, where in that case the Soviet Union was called, and how life changed there with the communists. Here are some girls, and moving here to like the true nature of documenting what was really happening over there. Um, just this is one of the pictures where he went back and saw like the effects of the war and how it left most of Germany, and well, I mean, and also most of Europe. Here we can see Poland. He liked to document movements, with this being communist and a Catholic parading in front of a former synagogue that converted to a church, documenting the changes. He later went to Israel and was documenting the immigrants, and he quoted, "The immigrants on these boats are mostly remains of people who 2,000 years ago left these shores to scatter to the far corners of the earth and now are coming back, most of them to live and some of them to die in the Holy Land." So he documented this, even though at first he was hesitant to go, but him being Jewish. But now that he went, uh, he showed his support and everything. Um, this is when he went to document for Pablo Picasso in photograph. He quoted, "Then I went to search for a different landmark of Paris, which was called Picasso. Pablo was a painter. Francois was also a painter and a mother, and Claude was a baby, and I was their photographer." So this was like a little summer he spent with them, with the family, and photograph documenting not only wartime photos but also the happy moments. But sadly, he went back to Indochina, where he photographed um, the Vietnam War. And this is considered to be one of Kappa's last pictures before he actually stepped on the landmine and unfortunately died. But it shows a little bit of like the horrors of a war, the preparation, everything he experienced, he documented into his photographs. The significance was that he was very dedicated to his work, gave it his all, always documented the good and the bad, always was up for the challenge, and he all his work changed the way people saw photojournalism. Kappa's image of Normandy invasion on D-Day redefined photojournalism, according to ArtNet. He quoted, "It's not always easy to stand aside and be unable to do anything except record the sufferings around one," he said once. Also, according to ArtNet, Kappa's photographs are recognized across the globe for their critical role in shaping public remembrance of these events. So all his photographs give a clear image of the wars he photographed. Um, Also, he's very known for Magnum Photos, which is like again an international photographic cooperative owned by the photographic members. With they have offices in New York, Paris, London, and Tokyo. The co-founder Henry Cartier-Bresson said, "Magnum is a community of thought and a shared human quality, curiosity about what is going on in the world, and a respect for what is going on, and a desire to transcribe it visually." Um, Magnum is also one of the first photographic cooperatives and owned and administered entirely by members. The staff serve a support role for the photographers who retain all copyrights to their own work, which was the main purpose of Magnum photography. Also, due to his being so passionate about his photographs, that way he was able to change photojournalism to show the truth behind each photograph, to show the importance behind each photograph, and spread meaning and awareness to people. And I think that was the most important thing about Robert Capa. So thank you for listening. I hope you learned a little bit about Robert Capa.